They called it performance realignment. I called it nonsense, especially since I was the one who built the system they now claimed I didn't fully understand. You don't fire the architect for walking through her own building, but they did, and while they thought I'd disappear quietly with my box of desk plants, they forgot one thing: nothing in that $60 million engine moved without the code I wrote, including its kill switch. My name is Emily Warren, and I used to believe that competence spoke for itself. 34 years old, 10 years in software engineering, and naive enough to think that building a $60 million system from scratch would secure my position at Horizon Vine Technologies. I should have known better when they started tracking bathroom breaks. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my corner cube, pushing my latest commit at 4:58 p.m. on a Thursday. Around me, the office theater was in full swing, developers hunched over keyboards, frantically typing nothing important, managers strutting between desks like peacocks surveying their domain. The new metrics dashboard glowed on every screen, tracking productivity in real time. Green meant you were coding, yellow meant you were thinking, red meant you were stealing company time. I was consistently red after 5 p.m. because unlike my colleagues who'd discovered the art of writing verbose comments and refactoring the same functions endlessly, I actually finished my work. "Warren, you heading out already?" Brad from DevOps called out, his voice carrying that perfect blend of fake concern and real judgment. He'd been here since 7 a.m., accomplishing what I could do in 2 hours, but his dashboard glowed a satisfying green. "Sprint's done," I replied, not looking up as I grabbed my laptop bag. "Pushed the authentication module 2 days early." "Must be nice," he muttered, loud enough for the others to hear. The office symphony of keyboards never missed a beat, but I felt the eyes. They always watched when someone left early. The government contract had changed everything at Horizon Vine. What started as a scrappy startup building cloud infrastructure had morphed into something unrecognizable when the Bureau of Digital Security dangled a 9-figure carrot. Suddenly, we weren't just developers, we were federal contractors, with obligations to taxpayers. The culture shift was swift and merciless. I'd architected the entire core system, every microservice, every API endpoint, every security protocol bore my fingerprints, while others played politics and posted inspirational quotes on Slack. I built the thing that would supposedly revolutionize how federal agencies handled secure data exchange. The irony was that I'd made it too efficient. My modules ran so smoothly that I didn't need 60-hour weeks to maintain them. That efficiency became my scarlet letter. The first warning came disguised as a sync-up with Rebecca, our HR director. She'd smiled that practice smile, the one that never reached her eyes, and asked about my work-life integration. "I notice you're very punctual," she'd said, making it sound like an accusation. "Always here at 9, always leaving by 5:30. "Is there a problem with my output?" I'd asked. "Oh no, your technical contributions are adequate." That pause before adequate hung in the air like a threat. "But we're concerned about optics, team cohesion, culture fit." Culture fit, the corporate equivalent of saying you don't belong without legal liability. I'd started noticing things after that meeting. My commits were suddenly requiring additional reviews. My architecture decisions were questioned by people who couldn't explain what an API was 6 months ago. Most telling of all, I wasn't included in the meetings about the very system I'd built. The new VP of engineering had arrived a month ago. Darren Cole came from one of those companies that confused activity with achievement. His first all-hands featured a 40-slide presentation about maximizing human capital and synergistic productivity. He'd looked directly at me when he mentioned players who weren't pulling their weight. I'd built their $60 million baby while he was still updating his LinkedIn with buzzwords. But sure, I wasn't pulling my weight. The Thursday I left at 4:58 p.m. would be my last normal day at Horizon Vine. I didn't know it yet, but Darren had already scheduled the Friday morning meeting that would end my time there. He'd already drafted the termination paperwork, already calculated that they could save my salary while my system ran itself. What he hadn't calculated was that I'd never transferred certain critical licenses to the company. Why would I? They were tools I'd developed on my own time, brought to the project because I believed in what we were building. The employment contract had a 90-day clause about personal IP plenty of time to negotiate fair compensation for my pre-existing work. They'd never asked, I'd never offered, and in 36 hours, that oversight would cost them everything. But that Thursday evening, I just drove home, made dinner, and spent exactly 0 minutes thinking about Horizon Vine Technologies. I'd logged my 40 hours. I'd delivered my code. If only they'd valued the work more than the performance of working. The email arrived at 8:43 a.m. Friday morning. Urgent mandatory meeting. Conference room A. No agenda, no context. Just Darren Cole's name at the bottom and Rebecca from HR CC'd. I knew before I even stood up from my desk. Conference room A was the execution chamber, the glass-walled space where careers went to die. Through those transparent walls, the entire office could watch your professional demise while pretending to focus on their screens. Corporate transparency at its finest. Darren sat at the head of the table, wearing his usual uniform blue shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up to show he was a hands-on leader. Rebecca flanked him with a manila folder that might as well have had termination stamped across it in red. They'd even brought Keith from IT, lurking in the corner with his laptop, ready to revoke my access the moment I was officially dead. "Emily, thanks for joining us," Darren began, as if I'd had a choice. "I'll cut right to the chase. We're making some organizational changes." I sat down slowly, maintaining eye contact. Organizational changes. "Your role is being eliminated." He delivered it like he was telling me the coffee machine was broken. "Effective immediately." "My role?" I kept my voice steady. "You mean the lead architect position for the system we're delivering to the Bureau next month?" Rebecca jumped in, her HR training kicking in. "This isn't about your technical capabilities, Emily. It's about cultural alignment and team dynamics." "I see." I leaned back, letting them fill the silence. Amateurs always fill the silence. Darren took the bait. "Your commitment to work-life balance is admirable, but this team needs people who go above and beyond, who show initiative beyond the bare minimum." The bare minimum being the 40 hours I'm contractually obligated to work. "See, that attitude right there?" He pointed at me like he'd caught me in something. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone else is putting in 60, 70 hours a week. They're showing dedication. You clock out at 5 like this is some government job." The irony of that statement, given our government contract, seemed lost on him. "Brad from DevOps logged 82 hours last week," he continued. "Sarah pulled 2 all-nighters to meet her sprint goals. That's the kind of commitment we need." I wanted to mention that Brad's 82 hours produced 3 barely functional features, while my 40 hours delivered the entire authentication framework. I wanted to point out that Sarah's all-nighters were fixing bugs in code she'd rushed through during previous all-nighters. But I didn't. I just nodded. "When do you need me out?" I asked instead. Rebecca slid the folder across the table. "We're prepared to offer 2 weeks severance in exchange for signing this separation agreement. You'll have until noon to collect your personal items." I flipped through the pages, scanning for the important parts. Non-disparagement clause, check. Non-compete, that definitely wouldn't hold up in court, check. And buried on page 4, the beautiful oversight that would soon destroy them, no mention of the proprietary tools and licenses I'd integrated into their precious system. "I'll need to document my current projects," I said. "Hand over passwords. Make sure the team can maintain what I've built." Darren waved his hand dismissively. "Keith has already revoked your access. We've got it covered. Your documentation is adequate." There it was again. Adequate. My documentation that included every function, every dependency, every integration point, every single detail except the ones that mattered, the ones about my personal encryption libraries and authentication tools that were still licensed under my name, not Horizon Vine's. "If you're sure," I said, signing the agreement with a steady hand. "We appreciate your professionalism," Rebecca chirped, already mentally checking off this termination from her Friday to-do list. Keith finally spoke up from his corner. "I'll need your laptop, badge, and any company equipment." I slid my laptop across the table, placed my badge on top. "The development environment on that machine has some custom configurations. You might want to—" "We've got it covered," Darren interrupted. "We're not exactly amateurs here." "No. I thought, watching Keith carelessly shove my laptop into a bag. You're not amateurs. Amateurs would have asked questions. Amateurs would have wondered why their lead architect wasn't fighting harder. Amateurs might have noticed the slight smile I was fighting to suppress. One question, I said as I stood to leave. Who's taking over the architecture, just so I know who to refer people to if they contact me? Darren puffed up. I'll be personally overseeing the technical direction. My experience with large-scale systems will be invaluable. His experience, the man who once asked me why we couldn't just download more RAM, was going to oversee my system. My $60 million baby was being handed to someone who thought GitHub was a type of social media. Best of luck, I said, meaning every word. They would need it. As I walked back to my former desk, to collect my things, I felt the eyes of the entire office on me. Some sympathetic, most just grateful it wasn't them. The typing had stopped. The performance paused for authentic drama. I packed my personal items slowly, methodically. A coffee mug, a small plant, a photo from the launch party when we'd first won the government contract. I left the awards, the certificates of appreciation, the team photos. Let them remember what they'd thrown away. By 11:30 a.m., I was walking out of Horizon Vine Technologies for the last time, cardboard box in hand like a corporate cliché. Behind me, Darren was probably already announcing my departure, spinning it as an opportunity for the team to step up, to show their dedication, to work even harder for even less recognition. They had no idea what they'd just done, no idea that in precisely 90 days, my personal licenses would expire and their $60 million system would start eating itself alive. But I knew, and for the first time in months, I left the office with a genuine smile. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I didn't even update my LinkedIn status to open to work. Instead, I drove home in complete silence, placed the cardboard box on my kitchen counter, and made myself a cup of coffee. The same Brazilian blend I'd been drinking at exactly 10:15 a.m. for the past 3 years, except now I could enjoy it without pretending to care about sprint velocities. The rage would come later. First, I had work to do. My personal laptop sat where I'd left it that morning, closed and unassuming. I opened it and began my real job, the one Darren Cole couldn't even comprehend existed. See, when you build a system from scratch, you know every hidden corner, every shortcut, every decision made at 2 a.m. when the deadline was breathing down your neck. You know which parts are held together with digital duct tape and prayers. More importantly, you know which parts are yours. I pulled up my development environment and started documenting. Not for them, they'd made it clear they didn't need my help. This was for me. Every custom library, every proprietary tool, every piece of code I'd written on weekends and integrated because I'd believed in the project. The encryption module that handled secure key exchanges mine, developed 2 years before I'd ever heard of Horizon Vine. The authentication framework that made their zero-trust architecture possible, built on my personal time, refined through my own side projects. The contract was clear: 90 days to transfer personal IP or negotiate licensing, standard stuff that most companies handle in the first week of development. But Darren had been too busy measuring hours to notice the foundation of his $60 million system was technically on loan. By evening, I'd compiled everything: 14 core modules, 37 utilities, and one particularly elegant piece of middleware that handled failover between services. Without it, the system would work until it didn't. One service hiccup, one unexpected load spike, and the whole thing would cascade like dominoes. That night, I incorporated Latitude Systems LLC. The name came to me while staring at my GPS coordinates on Google Maps. Latitude, the freedom to move north or south, the freedom to choose your direction. It cost me $300 and took 15 minutes online. By midnight, I was officially a consulting firm. I spent the weekend doing what unemployed engineers do. I monitored my old system, not through any nefarious means. The status pages were public, the performance metrics published for transparency. I watched response times, error rates, uptime percentages. Everything hummed along perfectly, my code doing exactly what I'd designed it to do. They'd probably celebrate it after I left. Darren had likely given some speech about trimming the fat and increasing efficiency. The team would nod along, secretly updating their resumes, but publicly praising his leadership. The show must go on. On Monday, I received 12 LinkedIn messages from recruiters and one text from Sarah. Can't believe they did that to you. Darren says he's promoting Brad to lead architect. Brad, the guy who thought MongoDB was a type of database migration tool. We're so screwed. I didn't respond. Sarah meant well, but she was still there, still playing the game, still pulling her all-nighters to impress people who counted hours instead of outcomes. Instead, I focused on building Latitude Systems' website. Clean, professional, understated. No buzzwords. No stock photos of people pointing at whiteboards. Just a simple message. Specialized consulting for critical system architecture and licensing compliance. The rage finally hit on Tuesday night. I'd been reviewing my notes when I found a comment I'd written in the code 6 months earlier. To-do, renegotiate personal licensing before production deployment. Don't let them forget this time. This time, because I'd been through this before, at a smaller company, and had promised myself I'd never let my work be taken for granted again, yet here I was, fired for refusing to pretend that presence equaled productivity, watching someone else take credit for systems they couldn't even understand. I opened my laptop and checked the system status again. Still perfect. Still running on code that would stop being legally licensed in 87 days. I could have sent an email, could have warned them, could have been the bigger person. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and started drafting a very different kind of document. A comprehensive audit of every line of code in their system that relied on my personal IP. Not for them, they'd figure it out eventually. This was for whoever would inevitably come looking for answers when everything went sideways. Because it would, not through any action on my part, but through their own arrogance and oversight. They'd built a $60 million house on a foundation they didn't own, and the lease was almost up. I raised my glass to my empty home office. To adequate documentation, I said to no one, and to the 90-day clause they forgot to read. Outside, the city hummed with the usual Tuesday night energy. Somewhere across town, my former colleagues were probably still at their desks, logging hours to impress a man who measured dedication by exhaustion. Brad was likely Googling system architecture for dummies and hoping nobody noticed. Let them scramble. Let them perform their productivity theater. I had 87 days to wait and a consulting firm to build. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely. It was anticipation, the calm before a storm that Horizon Vine Technologies had created themselves, one 40-hour week at a time. The first cracks appeared on a Wednesday. 72 days after my unceremonious exit, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, reviewing a potential client's architecture proposal, when my phone buzzed with a Google alert. Horizon Vine Technologies and system failure in the same headline. My coffee suddenly tasted much better. The tech blogs were having a field day. Government contractor experiences major outage during critical demo. Federal Bureau questions Horizon Vine's capability. After system collapse, $60 million contract in jeopardy as technical issues mount. I pulled up the public status page I'd been casually monitoring. Error rates had spiked to 37%. Response times were measuring in minutes, not milliseconds. The beautiful green dashboard I'd once maintained now looked like a Christmas tree on fire, red alerts everywhere. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another, and another. The fourth time, I recognized the number. Sarah, calling from her personal cell. Emily, thank God, she gasped when I finally answered. Everything's falling apart. The authentication service is rejecting valid tokens. The load balancer is routing traffic to dead nodes. And Brad just told Darren we need to turn it off and on again. I took a sip of coffee. Sounds like you have a problem. Emily, please, I know they screwed you over, but the Bureau is here. Like, actually here in the office. They're talking about pulling the entire contract. Have you tried turning it off and on again? I asked innocently. This isn't funny. Darren's in full panic mode. He's been screaming at everyone for 2 hours. He even called that consulting firm he used to work with. But they took one look at the codebase and said it would take them 3 months just to understand it. 3 months? I'd built it in 6. But understanding someone else's architecture always took longer than creating your own, especially when that architecture was properly complex, necessarily intricate, and thoroughly documented in a way that was technically complete, but practically useless without context. Why are you calling me? Sarah. Because you're the only one who actually understands this system. Emily, I'm begging you. Just tell me what's wrong, off the record, as a friend. A friend. The same friend who'd stayed silent when they marched me out. Who'd complained about the company but never stood up when it mattered. Check the license expiration dates on the third-party services, I said finally, not lying, just pointing her toward one of many problems they were about to discover. License expiration, but we have enterprise agreements. Not for everything. The line went quiet. I could practically hear her mind working, probably remembering all those times I'd mentioned personal tools and custom libraries, all those casual comments about my code that everyone had dismissed as developer ego. Oh God, she whispered. Emily, are you saying? I'm saying check the licenses. Gotta go. Sarah, good luck. I hung up and went back to my laptop. Within minutes, my LinkedIn showed 3 new profile views from Horizon Vine employees, then 5, then 12. The panic was spreading. By Thursday morning, the situation had escalated beautifully. Tech reporters were calling it the Horizon Vine meltdown. Someone had leaked internal Slack messages showing Darren demanding 100-hour weeks from the team to fix the issues. Screenshots circulated of Brad's code reviews, with comments like, "Not sure what this does, but it looks complicated, so LGTM." The Bureau of Digital Security released a terse statement. We are reviewing our partnership with Horizon Vine Technologies and exploring alternative vendors to ensure the security and reliability of our critical infrastructure. Translation: Horizon Vine was about to lose the contract that comprised 70% of their value. My phone had collected 43 missed calls by noon. Darren's number appeared 17 times. Rebecca from HR had tried twice. Even Keith from IT had attempted contact, probably wondering if maybe he should have asked about those custom configurations after all. I ignored them all and focused on my new client, a startup that actually understood the value of work-life balance. They'd found me through my website, impressed by my portfolio of efficient, maintainable systems built on sustainable practices. The real entertainment came via my former colleagues' social media. LinkedIn was full of carefully worded posts about exciting new opportunities and being ready for the next adventure. The rats were abandoning ship, and the ship was taking on water fast. Friday brought the crescendo. Darren had apparently offered the entire development team triple overtime to work through the weekend, the same team he'd driven to exhaustion for months. Now being asked to save a system they didn't understand from problems they couldn't identify. Sarah texted me a photo from the office. Pizza boxes stacked to the ceiling, energy drinks scattered like casualties, and in the middle of it all, Darren at a whiteboard trying to diagram my architecture from memory. The diagram looked like a toddler's interpretation of a subway map. He's offering $50,000 to anyone who can fix the authentication module. Her text read, $50,000, less than what they'd saved by firing me, and nowhere near enough to compensate for the 90 days of warnings they'd ignored. I screenshotted the text and filed it away. Not for any legal purpose. I had no intention of suing. This was so much better than any courtroom drama. This was natural consequences playing out in real time, a beautiful symphony of cause and effect. The system status page now showed 93% error rate. In 18 days, when the last of my licenses expired, it would hit 100. But they didn't have 18 days. The Bureau would pull the plug long before then, taking with them Horizon Vine's reputation, revenue, and any hope of future government contracts. All because they'd measured my worth in hours instead of output. All because Darren Cole thought leadership meant surveillance and productivity meant presence. I closed my laptop and decided to take the weekend off. 40 hours was enough for anyone. After all, the email that changed everything arrived on Monday at 9:27 a.m. Not from Horizon Vine, they were still drowning in their self-made disaster. This one came from Michael Reeves, Chief Technology Officer at the Bureau of Digital Security. Ms. Warren, I attended your presentation at DEF CON 3 years ago on Zero Trust Architecture. Impressive work. Given recent events with our current vendor, we're seeking an independent security audit of their systems. Your name came up. Interested? M. Reeves. I read it twice. Michael Reeves, the man who'd asked the smartest questions during my presentation, who'd understood the nuances of distributed authentication when everyone else was still debating passwords versus biometrics. He'd remembered me. I crafted my response carefully. Professional interest, competitive rates, immediate availability, no mention of my history with Horizon Vine. He probably knew people like Michael did their homework, but acknowledging it would be crass. His reply came within minutes. Excellent. Can you start tomorrow? Fair warning, it's a mess. Initial contract $80K for 2 weeks of assessment. Standard federal consulting rates apply. $80,000 to professionally document just how badly my former employer had screwed up. The universe had a sense of humor after all. I spent Monday afternoon preparing, reviewing federal compliance requirements, updating my security certifications, and most importantly, practicing my poker face in the mirror. I would need to walk into Horizon Vine's destruction and act surprised. Tuesday morning found me in the Bureau's downtown offices, all glass and steel and the quiet hum of serious business. Michael met me in the lobby tall, graying at the temples, with the kind of handshake that meant business. Emily, thanks for coming on short notice. Coffee. We sat in his office overlooking the city while he laid out the situation. Horizon Vine's system had been failing for 5 days. They'd brought in 3 different consulting firms, each of which had taken one look and declined the job. The Bureau was 48 hours from killing the contract entirely. We need to know if this is salvageable, he said, or if we need to start over with a new vendor. I need an honest assessment, not corporate spin. Understood. I'll need full access to the codebase, architecture documents, and deployment configurations. Done. He slid a laptop across the desk. This has everything. Fair warning, their documentation is adequate, I suggested. He smiled. That's generous. Their former lead architect apparently left recently. Since then, it's been chaos. I'll see what I can do. The laptop contained a horror show. Not my code that was still pristine where it existed, but the patches, the fixes, the desperate attempts to work around systems they didn't understand. Brad had apparently tried to replace my authentication module with something he'd found on Stack Overflow. It was like watching someone try to replace a heart with a bicycle pump. I opened my assessment document and began typing. Objective, professional, devastating. Critical finding number 1 core authentication service relies on unlicensed proprietary libraries. License expired 77 days ago. System operating in violation of terms. Critical finding No. 2. Load balancing algorithm has been modified. Breaking failover protocols. Original implementation appears to have been replaced with non-functional code. Critical finding of 3 security certificates are hard-coded with developer credentials. These credentials appear to belong to a former employee. I worked methodically, documenting each failure with clinical precision. By lunch, I'd identified 23 critical issues, each one traceable to either my unlicensed code or their incompetent attempts to fix it. Michael checked in around 2 p.m. How bad is it? How attached are you to this vendor? Not at all. They were the lowest bidder who could demonstrate a working prototype. The prototype was solid, I said carefully. The production system has fundamental issues that would require significant rework. You're looking at minimum 3 months, assuming you could find developers who understand the architecture. And if we can't, start over, new vendor, new system, it would be faster. He nodded slowly. I suspected as much. Can you document everything by end of week? I can have a preliminary report by Thursday. Perfect. Oh, and Emily, he paused at the door. If we do start over, would Latitude Systems be interested in bidding? There it was, the opportunity I'd been building toward without even knowing it. We'd be happy to discuss it, I said, maintaining professional calm while my heart raced. That evening, I worked from my home office, crafting the report that would bury Horizon Vine. Each finding was supported by evidence, each conclusion backed by data. It was a masterpiece of technical writing, objective, thorough, and absolutely damning. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time I answered. Emily. It's Michael Reeves. Sorry to call after hours, but I just got off a conference call with Horizon Vine's leadership. They claim their issues are due to sabotage by a disgruntled former employee. They specifically mentioned you. My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. I see. That's a serious accusation. It is. They claim you retained access and are somehow causing these failures remotely. Of course, our security logs show no external intrusions, and my team finds their claims unconvincing, but I need to ask, is there any validity to their accusations? Michael, I haven't accessed Horizon Vine's systems since my employment ended. What you're seeing is a failure to manage software licenses and intellectual property transfers. I'd be happy to provide documentation showing the timeline of my separation and the 90-day transfer clause they failed to execute. That would be helpful. For the record, I think they're grasping at straws, but I need everything documented. You'll have it by morning. I hung up and immediately began compiling evidence. Employment contracts, Git commit histories showing all my contributions predated my employment, the clear paper trail of proprietary tools I'd brought to the project. Let them try to blame me for their incompetence. I had receipts. By midnight, I'd sent Michael a comprehensive package proving my innocence and Horizon Vine's negligence. The truth was far more damaging than any sabotage could have been. They'd simply failed to understand what they'd built their empire on. Wednesday would bring Horizon Vine's final desperate attempts to save face, but I was done playing defense. It was time to build something better. Wednesday arrived with the kind of clarity that comes from holding all the cards. I'd spent the night reviewing my old employment contract, specifically Section 12.3, the intellectual property clause everyone signs but nobody reads. The language was beautifully clear. Employees shall have 90 days post-termination to transfer any personal intellectual property integrated into company systems. 90 days, not negotiable, not optional, binding. My report for the Bureau was already complete, but I had one more document to prepare. At 7:15 a.m., I drafted a formal notice to Horizon Vine Technologies, CCing their legal department and board of directors. Intellectual property license expiration. Critical system components. This letter serves as formal notification that personal intellectual property licenses integrated into Horizon Vine systems expired on day 91 following my termination. As per Section 12.3 of my employment agreement, the company had 90 days to negotiate transfer or licensing terms. No such negotiation was initiated. The following components are affected: Warren Authentication Framework, WAF, Distributed Load Balancing Algorithm, DLBA, Secure Token Management System, STMS, 11 additional proprietary modules, full list attached. Continued use of these components without proper licensing constitutes intellectual property violation. Immediate cessation of use is required to avoid legal liability. Emily Warren, CEO, Latitude Systems, LLC. I sent it at exactly 9 a.m., then poured myself coffee and waited. The response came faster than expected. 43 minutes later, my phone rang. Rebecca from HR, though she now introduced herself as Senior Vice President of Human Capital. Emily, we received your letter. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Which part is unclear? Rebecca, you developed these components while employed by Horizon Vine. They belong to the company. Actually, if you check the Git history I've attached, you'll see initial commits for all components predate my employment by 6 to 18 months. I brought existing tools to the project, as documented in my hiring negotiations. Silence, papers shuffling, probably lawyers whispering in the background. We'd like to resolve this amicably, she finally said. What are your terms? Licensing fee of $2 million per year, retroactive to the expiration date, or a one-time transfer fee of $15 million. That's extortion. That's market rate for technology that powers a $60 million system. I've included 3 independent valuations from IP specialists. We'll need to discuss this internally. Of course, you have until 5 p.m. Friday. After that, I'll need to pursue other options to protect my intellectual property. The other options were deliberately vague. Let their lawyers' imaginations run wild. By noon, the tech blogs had picked up the story. Horizon Vine faces IP crisis as former employee claims ownership of core systems. The narrative was shifting from incompetence to something worse, corporate theft. Michael Reeves called at 2:30 p.m. Emily, I just got off a very interesting call with Horizon Vine's CEO. He seems to be under the impression that you're blackmailing them. I'm protecting my intellectual property rights. Everything is documented and above board. Oh, I know. I've had my legal team review everything you sent. It's airtight. I'm actually calling about something else. We're officially terminating Horizon Vine's contract as of Monday. Would Latitude Systems be interested in an emergency sole source contract to build a replacement system? My hand tightened on the phone. We'd be very interested. Excellent. Fair warning, it's a tight timeline. 3 months to minimum viable product. 6 months to full deployment. Budget is $40 million. But we need guaranteed delivery. $40 million. Less than Horizon Vine's contract, but pure profit for a company of one. Send me the requirements. I'll have a proposal by Friday. Already sent. Emily, off the record, your authentication framework is exactly what we need. I assume you'd be willing to license it to the Bureau directly. For the right terms, absolutely. Thursday was a blur of activity. While Horizon Vine's lawyers bombarded me with increasingly desperate offers, $3 million, $5 million, $7 million, I focused on building my proposal for the Bureau. Clean architecture, realistic timelines, and most importantly, full ownership of all code with no ambiguous licensing. The beauty was in the simplicity. I already had the core components. I knew exactly what the Bureau needed, and I could deliver it in half the time with a tenth of the drama. By Thursday evening,